Congratulations, you made it to the Exfil. You can relax, unpack your bags, and we hope you enjoy the show. Hey there, Mike, aka MTBtrigger here, and with me as always is my co-host Ronal, aka Eric. If you are brand new, welcome. This is an Escape from Tarkov podcast where we talk about all things EFT, and our goal is to get better at the game, and we hope you come along with us for that journey. Short hideout keeping today because it is a guest episode. So the only thing that I have for you today is I want you all to know we are now up on Facebook. We're getting all of the episodes rendered and uploaded there, basically one per day. So if you are on Facebook, help us out. Or if you've sworn it off and you only use your wife or your significant other's phone to browse and stalk on your friends and family, please log on your account just once for us. Like, follow, share, do the Facebook thing for us. You guys are amazing as always. If you can give us a little boost on Facebook, thank you. It's XPMediaNow on Facebook. So that's it. That's all we got for hideout keeping. Support for this show is brought to you by MANSCAPED.com. Save 20% and get free shipping with code Exfil. That's EXFIL at MANSCAPED.com. All the way through the holiday season, 20% off, free shipping. Other ways to support the show, share it with a friend. For those of you that want to support directly, we do have a Patreon for that. The best thing you can do for us, though, is just mention the show, tell somebody about it. If you see somebody new to the game, let them know. You can find us on all of the social media channels. You can find us on YouTube. And if you're looking for me personally, you can find me on Twitch and Twitter at MTBtrigger. And you can always find me in Discord. But that's all for me. Ronal, how are you, man? Let these fine folks know how to get in touch with you. And why don't you go ahead and introduce our guest as well?
Hey, what's up, everybody? Doing fantastic. Looking forward to tonight's episode. The best way to get a hold of me is always in Discord. Go ahead and tag me in a message or send me a DM. We're checking Discord all day long and talking to people on a pretty regular basis. If you have any questions about your PC or trying to get maybe some new PC parts for the holiday season coming up, check out the hardware upgrade section in Discord. It's been pretty active. We've got myself and a number of other people answering questions, helping people build new PCs for Christmas coming up. Also making that switch from console to PC and picking up PUBG or Tarkov or anything else. We got a number of people playing a number of different games. Check out the hardware area. We're here to help you if you have any questions. You can also follow me on the Twitters at Ronal Gaming. And of course, you can find me hanging out in stream, watching Trigger a couple times a week and watching actually our guest this week a couple times a week as well. And besides that, if you have something more formal, you can always email the show at xpmedia2020@gmail.com. That's the business side of XP Media. Get a hold of us there. But that's it for hideout keeping. We are very, very excited tonight. As Trigger mentioned, we have a very special guest, someone who was with us in episode 7 of the Exfil. So you can go back on YouTube or your favorite podcast app and find his very first appearance on the show back then. This week, that is pretty exciting, though, because you may find him playing drums on stream or owning people in Tarkov or, doing something fun. But Dottyhack, we're glad to have you on the show, sir. Welcome, and it's great to see you, man.
Hey, guys. Thank you so much for having me again. It's been a pleasure. I have been so excited to touch base with you guys again. And, I am really looking forward to getting into this tonight.
Yeah, dude. I was laughing because I was sitting there thinking about it doesn't feel like it was that long ago. And I think part of that is because I know Eric, you hang out in his Twitch a lot. I try to stop in from time to time. And every time we come in there, or at least every time I go in there, I feel like we always end up having a conversation about something. Obviously you're streaming and I'm in chat, but we always have this little moment there of talking about whatever's going on. And because of that, it's like, man, has it really been 43 episodes since we had Dotty on? Like, that blew my mind before we started.
That's been a long time, man. You guys have just been cranking it out show after show. Like, I'm loving the success that you guys are getting. And like, it's just going to continue to get better, man. I'm so excited for you guys. And thank you guys again for having me on.
Yeah, it's awesome to have you here. I always joke that I only really subscribe to 2 Twitch channels, and that's you and Geek. And I'm contractually obligated to subscribe to Triggers, so so it's awesome, man. I love your community. We definitely love what you have going on. Love your positivity and love watching what you do, man. So it's really great to have you here and talk some Tarkov tonight and maybe some other stuff. We'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those of you that maybe you started listening to the show more recently, or you haven't gone back and listened to the back catalog, I do want to let you know that it was a much more interview format when we had Dotty on. And this is actually a really cool story. So the person that introduced me to Tarkov was named Dadcaster. And we had Dadcaster on the show. He was also an early guest on the show. And he's like, hey, I know somebody that you guys should have on the show. He'd be great. And that was our first introduction to Dotty, made the connection, and it happened in like a day. I mean, it was like, hey, how's it going? Hey, you want to come on the show? Yep. Okay, let's do this thing. Because of that, we were finding out about you as much as you were finding out about us. So if you haven't listened to that episode, make sure you go back to episode 7. There's a lot of awesome info on Dotty. It was great to have him on back then. Great to have him back now, but we're not going to go deep into the backstory because we've already done that. And for those that have been listening the whole time, we don't want to go through that again. So let's jump into Tarkov, man. I mean, you have been owning recently, but let's talk about kind of state of the game right now. You know, the last couple of patches have been a lot of quality of life stuff. We've gotten some cool features specifically for newer players to the game. We got a new bleed effect. We got a compass. We got all this kind of stuff going on. Is there anything that really jumps out to you? Even if it's not a big thing, but has anything really were you like super impressed with any of the patch or anything that's changed your gameplay at all that's come out recently?
I wouldn't say anything specifically that came out in the game. On the quality of life side, though, I know they've recently just fixed the late spawns. And I can't tell you how frustrating it is getting into a raid and, you know, you're a minute and a half, 2 minutes, 3 minutes behind the start. And, like, you're on customs and the guys that spawn by Junk Bridge are already booking it to dorms and everyone's just all over the place and you can't account for where people are going to be based on the spawn that you get. So I really have been impressed by Battlestate's ability to kind of remove that from the game and make that something like as a point of emphasis, because it was so crucial for like your progression through a raid, depending on whether you spawned in on time or not. I know multiple friends that play like Interchange, for instance, and if you're 2 minutes late to an Interchange raid, Kill is already dead and they're already hauling his stuff out to the other extracts. So like that's how critical it is, like making sure you spawn it on time. So big props to Battlestate for figuring that out, because that's just a huge thing that that's affected all of us when we play Tarkov from time to time.
I agree, man, and I think the big maps are less obvious when it comes to exactly how big of an effect a late spawn can happen. And, you know, for somebody new to the game, right, you're not worried about, oh, how much time is in this raid and how late did I spawn, right? When you're new to Tarkov, or, you know, maybe still just getting your bearings in Tarkov, you're not worried about that. You don't care, right? It's like, okay, there's 40 some minutes left. I got to figure out how to not die. And that bush just made a ton of noise, right? So it's so detrimental though, because other players, like, you know, a seasoned player is going to clear spawns. They're going to have a route they want to run depending on the spawn location. And so when you come in late, yeah, you can disrupt it and throw somebody off, but more likely is somebody has already got the jump on you. And I'm thinking of maps like Factory, right? That's where it was most obvious to me, because I would play Factory all the time. And if I got a late spawn, and it was one of those ones like glass hallway or something, and there's a dude right in front of me shooting me as I spawn in. That was brutal, and that's clearly an obvious situation. But to your point, you don't, like, someone who's learning Interchange or learning customs, and they've watched a video of somebody running in there and getting high tier loot, and they keep running in, and if they get late spawns, they're like, there's never any loot here. Well, that's because it's already been, there's already been a fight. It's out. Some, hatchet runner or pistol runner went in, yoinked all the loot, and you never knew they were there.
That's true. I'll have to send you guys a clip sometime. I think I may have had like one of the shortest raids ever on factory, going back to that glass hallway spawn, and I remember going into a factory. I was late, saw that I was about a minute or a minute and a half late, and then I just fell over dead as soon as I spawned. And I'm just like, why is this still a thing in Tarkov? And this was back in like 0.11, 0.10.5 or whatnot. So it's always baffled me how that continued to happen. But you're right, like a seasoned player, like myself, is gonna know where all the spawns are on customs. Like, so if I spawn big red side, I know if I'm at the land bridge, all right, I can check across. I'm gonna check back by the crossroads. Someone might be in big red already or in the garages. But like for the people that are playing Tarkov for the first time or getting used to it, they're not going to know where the spawns are. They're probably not even going to be familiar with where they are on the map at first. So yeah, it does make quite a bit of difference when you're asking the type of player it affects when it comes down to those late spawns.
Yeah, and you talked about how, if you get past where PMCs are, or you're not sure exactly where they are, you're trying to clear out those spawns. And it's a really big deal. I've actually noticed that, believe it or not, I have a question for both of you. Have you noticed that scav runs, like they fixed the PMC spawn problem for the most part, but I've noticed that scav running this week, that some interesting things have been having with the scavs. Like I scav in right next to another scav that I'm not in group with, and it's a player scav and they turn and shoot you or something. It's been really odd. And I'm kind of wondering if that was a side effect of this. I'm not really sure how they could be related, but it's really interesting. It happened to me twice on Factory today, trying to do scav runs on Factory. Spawned in, turned to my left, and boom, dead, because there was a player scav right next to me. I was like, what? And it's been more prevalent since they made this fix. So I don't know. It could just be my computer or whatever, but definitely an interesting, byproduct of that.
It's happened to me a bit. I would say I have noticed that. I haven't been scavving as much recently because I've been working on the Punisher challenge, but I have noticed, like, if I scav Interchange, a handful of times I will scav in, and there'll be another person that either spawned right next to me or was, like, within, 5 to 10 yards. And they'll go run and like loot a corpse or something, and I'm like, wait, what? Why are they doing that right in front of me? They didn't even know. And it was just like, boom, they're dead. Okay. Oh, it was a player. Okay. And it's just kind of odd. Maybe that is a side effect. I don't know that it's horrible, but again, that's from having played this game for a while now. If somebody new logs in and just dies within a minute of scavving, you'd be like, what was going on?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, I just predominantly scav reserve now at this point, and I've done a couple of those like scav army runs where you get your buddies to go in with you. And I recall the other day when a four man of us went into reserve, and we spawned out in the field where the bunkers are, and there was this other player scav, and we're all kind of like just looking at each other like, is this guy part of our group? Like, I don't remember seeing him in the loading screen. And then all of a sudden one of my guys just comes like barreling through and then shoots him. And then one of the other guys got confused and was shooting, and we all basically ended up just killing each other in this instant. But like, I have experienced spawning in as a scav and then being immediately like surrounded by other player scavs in that general vicinity. So I have seen that more often than I have in the past. So
yeah, it definitely would be hard for new people to the game to deal with that. You wouldn't even understand what happened, right? But I just, before we, got off the spawn topic, I wanted to ask you both that question. And just because it's been happening quite a bit to me.
Yeah, no, it's good. And it actually has me thinking about something else I wanted to talk about, which is the Punisher challenge, which I kind of brought up And we talked about factory a lot in the last episode, and this new the new spawning mechanic, having to wait for everybody to join at the same time. I started attempting the Factory Punisher challenge, getting the 30 kills in an hour after this change. And because of that, I was spending a lot more time waiting for lobbies to load. So I also noticed it there, but I didn't experience people loading in late, which if you play Factory in any sort of quantity before this change, you'll remember times where you would hear somebody spawn in and you'd be like, oh my gosh, they're right around the corner, and you just go kill them. And it's just like what happened to Dotty. Like, you spawn in and you die, and it's like, oh, this is awful. This doesn't feel good. And so I noticed that, yeah, it's hurting my time trial effectively, but there was never instances of people spawning in late, which was kind of nice, actually. So I like it from that perspective, but when you're trying to minimize time out of raid, it was kind of brutal that way. But the reason I wanted to talk about Punisher, Dotty, was you're somebody that plays a lot of the bigger maps, I would say. I see you, I mean, I loved watching you run a lot of Interchange. I loved watching you run night raids on Shoreline. Recently, you've been playing a lot of customs. So I know that you're not, I mean, I know you've done labs, I know you do factory and all that, but I watch you a lot on those bigger maps. So when you look at something like the Punisher challenge, which is, you qualify in factory and then it's going to be PvP on labs, I don't want to say that's not your wheelhouse, but it's not something I've seen you do a whole lot of. So is it something that you have an interested in, or is it something you're not interested in, or what do you think about the whole idea behind a PvP challenge like this?
Well, firstly, what I think is going to be really unique about this event is the fact that they're going to have specific dedicated servers for this event, which was something that they didn't have in the last event. And when you're talking about a PvP based tournament like this, the hardest part is having a dedicated server that everyone is playing on to kind of have a consistent raid, so to speak, or server, or whatever the term you want to use. So having that be the case now for this tournament makes it a lot more interesting than the one in the past. Now, as far as like the qualifier goes, I know you and I talked about this a little bit before we got started tonight. It's a lot of that time is just in and out, loading in and then leaving raids. So like Battle State did a great job of removing like the delay when you would invite somebody or when they would like load into the menu, which was great. But now it seems like, okay, now my game hangs for 30 seconds to a minute, 2 minutes when I'm trying to leave a raid. So that's just time that's going to eat away at that little qualifier that you have to do. As far as labs goes for this tournament, that's been the PvP map. Like if somebody just wants to throw on a big kit, go into a raid and just shoot everything in sight, like you go to labs. And one of the reasons why I'll play a lot of Shoreline or I'll play a lot of customs, not so much Interchange anymore, is just because those are the experiences that I know Tarkov to be. If I wanted to go play like what is essentially a deathmatch, then I'll go into a labs or a factory. But for me, when I'm still trying to focus on just survival and just going through like the progression of a raid, getting some scavs, trying to find the scav boss, checking various like positions on customs, whether it's the gas station or dorms or stronghold, it's a lot more fluid. And what I notice when I play labs, it's just, and I don't have any key cards either, so it's not like I'm looting anything. I'm just going around chasing shots. And as great as that is for Tarkov, like it's not the all-encompassing vibe that I like to have when I play the game myself, but it's the perfect scenario for a PvP tournament like Pestyly's Punisher tournament. So like it's going to blow the charts off of the Twitch viewership and the landscape and the viewership for the game. So like I'm actually really excited to see it. And I know I talked to you guys before. I don't know if I want to participate, but if I do, I'm just going to use a Glock. Like, I just want, give me a pistol, let me go in there. Let me see what I can do. I don't want to win, but like if I do good, then, you know, I'll be proud of myself for even showing up for something like that.
Right. I was giving you the out if you didn't want to talk about not wanting to participate. But you didn't take it. You threw yourself under the bus, so you have to deal with that. You get all the backlash. Horns up. Let's go. Anyway, that's the best Twitch emote, by the way. There's nothing better than spamming horns in chat, dude. I love the horns, by the way.
Dude. The metal is such an underappreciated genre of music because it gets a lot of hate from people that don't quite understand it. But it is, like, some of the most wholesome people I've ever met have all come from these bands or this genre of music, and it is such just a loving, tight-knit group. Everyone's so kind. Not to like get off the Tarkov subject, but like, man, the amount of incredible people that I've met throughout my life has just been astonishing, and most people wouldn't believe it. But the metal community is just a bunch of kind, loving people. Man, it's awesome.
I think your Twitch community is a really good representation of that. I mean, it's kind of cool when, you know, someone resubs or there's a gift or something and you say horns in chat and then everyone just spams it, man. And that emote is, you know, the hand signal, the traditional metal, you know, rocking out hand signal. And it's really cool. So I do want to come back to that metal scene, your community specifically in that later. But you said a few things that just really jumped out to me. You talked about the private server for a PvP event. And for anyone who hasn't competed in something or doesn't know the significance of this, that can seem like a really small point. But being able to control at least some of it, or having some... I can't even fathom how cool this is going to be. And I want to get in the tournament, right? I'll be honest. I would love to be in this tournament, just simply for qualifying from using the factory map. Like that would be enough for me. I don't care how I do in the lab side. It would just be cool to qualify based on factory. But having the ability in this game, and I have said this for so long, I think Tarkov would be one of the most amazing games if they had partners or segments of people that were allowed to have custom servers. Now, I don't know if Pestily is going to have control over these servers. Presumably, it'll be someone from Battlestate running them. But I just want to put this out there. Can you imagine if, you know, podcast communities, streaming communities, YouTube channels had the ability to get private servers or just a, you know, custom servers where they could bring community in and do things like, you know, what we see in Among Us. You could do hide and seek. You could do, you know, one PMC and a bunch of scavs. Like the number of things that you could do with a community of people on a closed system Tarkov server blows my mind. And that, like, I hope this tournament goes well, and I hope it proves the power of a custom server for Tarkov. So I'm going to throw that to you, Dotty, because you have a large community, one that's passionate about this game, and they're very positive. It's a really cool environment. So, like, what would you do with a custom server? How cool do you think that would be if you had access to tweak it a little bit or do something with it?
So one of the things that originally came to mind when we started talking about this whole private server thing, I don't know if either of you are familiar with a Tarkov streamer by the name of Sigma.
Mm-hmm.
She puts on a tremendous event with her community Evasion, which is essentially like a PvP or like competition style Tarkov event. And one of the things that's always, like, she and I have always talked about over the years, and I know this is something that she's always wanted, was having private servers for those events, because people will be tasked with objectives in her game, and they all have to go into separate raids to do different tasks and perform different things, you know, pick up different gear, find the boss on this map. But the thing that was always so, like, stand out about that was that everybody was on a different server, so everyone's experience was going to be different. But say you had 10 people all on the same server, all competing against each other directly heads up for the same objectives, for the same task items, for the same boss that you have to kill, like, that is truly something we have yet to see in Tarkov and would be completely unprecedented. So that's why I think Pestyly's Punisher tournament coming up is so unique and is going to be such a huge thing to the community. But not only from the PvP competitive side of things, something that I've always often thought about having private servers with buddies is the ability to take like various cool screenshots with one another, stage videos that you could do. Like, you could basically simulate firefights and record that and then use that for footage in your stream or for YouTube or whatever the case may be. I know Clean does a lot of that on his channel. He's got like the security cam footage and it's all like live in raid stuff that's been filmed, which is super cool. But like, you even think about the opportunity for Machinima series. So guys like FairTX, Aqua FPS, Junker, all those guys that do those video editing that they do, get 10, 12 people in a server that they can coordinate with. Absolute unlimited possibilities when it comes to this game. And I think that once they find a way to nail that, it's just going to change the game completely, especially because when you think about it, it's going to have to behave kind of like an offline raid. When you think about it, like, you're not going to gain any progression, you're not going to lose any progression, but you can go into a raid with all of your friends, with all of your buddies, and do whatever it is that you're trying to do, and just have a really good experience with it.
Yeah, we've been talking about kind of over the last few episodes about this idea that what if they let you do offline raids with your friends, something totally separate. It could be used for so many good things. It could be used to teach people how to play. You could take people in and say, this is how you need to play, whatever, but you could also do some of this more machinima type things. I actually think it's a great idea, and I wonder if this is successful, if Pestyly's tournament, draws a lot of views, if people really respond positively to it. I wonder if Battle State will take notice of that and potentially put in, test servers. Other games like PUBG, they have test servers. They've got custom servers that you can make. It'd be interesting to see what they do with that.
Yeah, I know they just recently added the ETS, like the test server that they have, which I got into. I haven't really delved into it a whole lot, and it's technically still under NDA, so we can't really talk about it. But that's like a step in the right direction, like allowing people to try things out before it hits the live server. So that's a really cool idea. But having the ability to Sherpa somebody through a raid on a non-live raid event would just do so many positive things for a lot of the newer players that are trying to get used to the game. You can show them all the Exfils, you can get them introduced to some of the boss fights, you can show them where other spawns are. Like, there's an endless amount of knowledge that one can gain from doing offline raids with your buddies without having all that added pressure of like, oh, I might get shot, I might lose my gear, what am I gonna do? All those things that end up coming up. It's just such a wonderful idea, and I know it's been talked about for a while, so I'm really excited to see how this Pestily Punisher tournament goes, to see if that's something that's going to be possible for the state of Tarkov.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's gotta be one of the big things that I would see for the future of the game. Like, everything you're saying, I mean, Dotty, you pointed out the PvP aspect, you pointed out the content creation aspect, Eric, you pointed out the helping a friend, helping a new player. What we didn't really touch on would be the PvE aspect, right? And whether or not there's progression tied to it or not, I think if you had the ability to bring friends into a raid and you could, force raider spawns or just, tweak things around a little bit more, like, you could do a lot of really cool stuff just from a PvE standpoint without other players on a closed map as well. So it just seems like this is more than just a tournament. So this is a great discussion, because Dottie, you brought up a couple things there that I think would be would be really great. I mean, imagine that. Like, these guys are doing great cinematic stuff already, but imagine if you had a closed server where you could run tweaks and, you could set stuff up that way. That would be really cool.
Yeah, that's just that there's such a limitless possibility to that, and I would love getting lost in some of the videos that some of these guys come up with, because a lot of the content creators in this community just have so many solid ideas. I would love to see them being able to pull more of those ideas out by simply having the space to do all that stuff.
I think one of my favorite things is hearing where people's passion is. And I think hearing what you just said about this private server, you said something else that I kind of want to ask you. You said that you see the Tarkov experience as being the customs, the interchange, the reserve, the bigger maps is the way I would say that. Can you define, and I love hearing what about this game people have attached themselves to, or what they fell in love with, why it continues to be a game that deserves a majority of your time. What is it about those maps that you believe is the Tarkov experience? Why do you like those so much?
It's simply the RNG. It's simply the randomness. It's simply the variance that you get raid to raid to raid. Whether the boss is going to be on the map, whether or not a 5-man's going to walk in the front of East Wing on Shoreline, and you're going to empty every round of your MP7 into their heads. Like, there's so many things in Tarkov that can happen in a particular raid, and with the time cycles in the raid, the weather cycles in the raid, whether a boss is on a map, whether the LEDX that you're trying to find in 226 or 108 East is there. That's what makes it so unique for people is that randomness. And I know that they're going to be adding a dynamic loot system to Tarkov, so more loot is going to be found in more random various places. The reason why I typically refrain from labs or even factory, I'll usually play factory if I just want to do a couple of slower raids, usually, take a 5-7 into factory, but labs just became too predictable. It became the same experience, and it is just not truly that survival aspect of what Tarkov is about. It seems like you've just got guys with HKs, 60-round mags, Altons, and they're just unloading on everything. I personally kind of like to kick back, let things flow, hit a couple long shots, then get up in someone's face, like in dorms if I need to charge and clear a floor or something like that. And all those variances on all those maps are what are more enjoyable to me personally.
Well, and you brought up dynamic loot, and then you brought up the randomness of the encounters. And I guess one of the things, if I had to put a word on it, it would be concern. But I have a little bit of concern that truly dynamic loot would ruin some of those things that you described, right? Because when you say a 5-man team running into East Wing, well, that's kind of like controlled RNG, right? Because the reason a 5-man team would run to East Wing is because they're after the loot that's in Resort. So do you think that making it dynamic, even in pockets, could have an adverse effect on some of those situations that you outlined?
Possibly. From what I understand, I don't think they're going to change the loot tables that are in place already. What I think they're going to do is expand that. So that LEDX, might spawn down at the pier, or it might spawn in one of the cottages, like in other various places where you're not simply just going to one location and just trying to farm it over and over and over and over again. And that's kind of been the experience when you go into Shoreline when you're looking for a lot of LEDXs or high value loot. Like, those gun battles are always over those rooms that have the LEDX because that's where they are. But throwing random loot, like occasionally, making it dynamic and dispersing it in other locations across the map may provide a different experience for people, simply knowing that they could potentially find like the loot that they're looking for like a high value quest item in the town or in the power plant or at the weather station. Because right now, like in a map like that specifically, the majority of people typically tend to rush the resort because that's where the value is. That's not to say you can't find like hundreds of thousands of rubles worth of gear throughout the rest of the map, but when you're only finding things like lead X's and stuff like that in that specific location, it just creates a funnel. And even if you spawn on, I think it's the west hand side of the map where that radar station is, you're just booking it for the resort. There's nothing else on that side of the map that's going to keep you interested. It's just barren. It's just forest. There's a couple of stashes. There's the weather station that doesn't have a ton of loot, but if you're on that side of the map, you're just booking it for resort to try and find like those lead X's, those ophthalmoscopes, scopes, the Tetrises, etc., etc. So if you are able to randomly put like a lead X or an ophthalmoscope, things like that in other various parts of the map, I think it would give people a bit of a rush. Like if they found something like that in a place that wasn't specifically somewhere where they thought that's where an item like that would exist.
What do you think about, you're talking about like lead X's, we're talking the resorts loaded, and then you've kind of got these second tier loot areas like on Shoreline or like on Customs, right? What do you think about the risk versus the home run for loot in Tarkov? Like if you storm into a resort, you definitely have a higher chance of getting cleared out. You may be successful. You might, have a higher chance of dying right away. Depending on what kind of kit you have, you could be definitely burning through expensive gear on a more rapid basis. But if you pull out a lead X, it might be worth it. I mean, what's been your experience with kind of like risk versus reward with just shooting for that high tier loot?
Well, for me, like, I have 70 million in rubles and like 150 million stash value. For me, the realistic thing that I'm trying to go for in a raid is try to get PvP because it's exciting and that's what a lot of audiences want to see. But I'm honestly just trying to refill my my ammo. Like I'm just trying to constantly replenish the ammo that I'm using. Now, if I wanted to avoid those kinds of things, I could still you can still run the outskirts of the map and make a lot of money. You might not make quite as much because you won't find the lead X, or you won't find 4 Tetrises or 3 water filters or things like that. So it really just depends on the personal objective you have going into a raid. And with me and a lot of the guys that I play with, we're looking for high impact plays. We're looking to, secure a lot of loot that can replen, armors and ammo that we're dumping, constantly throughout a raid, and trying to just see if we can make it out and, like put more pennies in our pocket. I know I have a couple friends that have like literally 300 or 400 million rubles. And at that point, Tarkov's kind of pointless. You can buy whatever you want. You can do whatever you want. Those guys are literally just going in to wipe servers. That is their only objective. That is the only thing that they do. But for the majority of people, that's not realistic because they don't have that kind of time. So, like, if you're somebody going into the resort looking to just make, a couple 100,000 rubles safely, get out, do your thing, like, you don't have to go to the resort to make all that kind of money, but it would be awesome for that guy who's running stashes to find lead X's or, other high value items in various areas that's unexpected. Gives those areas a little bit more purpose and worth checking.
Yeah, it's interesting because I found that as a new player, right, about a year ago when we picked up the game, storming into PvP for me, I just died all the time because there was definitely a lot of high time players that were going after the high tier loot, right? Because that's where you end up being when you, like you say, when your stash value gets so high that it doesn't matter, right? And that progression of getting better at Tarkov and getting to the point where I'm at personally now, where I'm kind of in the same boat as you for example with like money wise. Not level-wise, but money-wise, and definitely not experience-wise. But I have enough money that I can run whatever kit that I want to. But I still find myself having like a little bit of fear for like taking a 1,000,000 ruble kit in, right, and just run right into resort. But at the same time, you make a great point. If you're listening to this and you're thinking to yourself, at what point does money not matter? It's in the tens of millions of rubles where it really just doesn't start to really be an impact to you if you have to spend, realistically a couple 100,000 to rekit out, whether it's ammo or build guns or whatever. So that's why it's interesting to get your perspective on this, because you have so much experience in Tarkov that there's different types of people. There's some people who are afraid of PvP. There's some people that live for it, right? And Tarkov, I think, can support both. I've kind of had this theory that really Tarkov can support both types of play styles. And if you really grind on Tarkov, you can make plenty of money and never really go to the high tier, high risk areas.
Yeah, absolutely. But like, obviously, when you're on the broadcasting side of things, you want to find people to shoot at, right?
Yeah.
You're trying to find the squads that you can go after. But I know a couple of guys that, like Geeks. We talked about Geeks earlier. He has a great amount of wealth and knowledge. He's got some incredible YouTube videos for people on how to make money with avoiding PvP areas and things like that. So I guess it really just comes down to how you want to play Tarkov, and do you want to take some of those risks to maybe get a few extra rubles out of a raid?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's really great that you were able to speak to both types of players, so appreciate that. I got to take us back, though, to customs strategy, because I've watched you do something on stream that it was just the other night, and I was like, I didn't know you could do that. And it turned into like this, I got to talk to Dotty about this. You jumped up on top of one of the sheds, I think, kind of by Big Red, and we're looking, was it on the other side of Big Red by the train tracks? Anyways, you were on top of a building, like prone, shooting across the valley at scavs. And I guess I wanted to talk to you about that. Like, how many buildings can you get on top of, and how effective of a strategy is that? I mean, it was really super interesting to watch, because it seems like the players that you were shooting at, or even the scavs, your line of sight, you don't look up on top of the building very naturally. So is that something you do, or is that something you just tried? Or talk about that for a little bit.
Well, so a while back, my buddy Forecast and I would do that quite often. There's a couple of different spots that you can get up on throughout the customs location. It's really helpful for getting Shooter Born in Heaven done. And I can tell you, like, I look forward to Shooter Born in Heaven just because there's so many spots that I utilize on each map that will help me get those 100-meter headshots, and that's one of them.
I was going to ask, what's your favorite gun to do Shooter Born in Heaven shots with?
So, mostly I've been using the DVL because it's so quiet and it's predominantly light and short. So it can condense to a 2x4 if you need to stuff it in a bag. I think it only weighs like 4.5 kilos, and I'm pretty sure it's the quietest bolt-action sniper rifle in Tarkov. I love the T5000 Orsis, but it's like 2 kilograms heavier and 2 cells longer, and I think it's bugged right now, so even when you collapse it, it doesn't actually collapse. But I personally enjoy using bolt-action rifles because it's more of a challenge for me to hit headshots like that, so it's more meaningful to land a shot on target, and I have to exercise a lot more patience, precision, and accuracy when I use a bolt-action rifle versus saying like an SVD. It'd be pretty easy to get Shooter Born in Heaven done having a DMR with a higher higher bullet velocity to get those headshots. So like adding those little bit of challenges are what I personally enjoy in Tarkov. Now going back to Ronald's original point about a lot of the buildings and customs, I think people just don't expect that, and perhaps maybe I've run into players that didn't even realize that you could get up onto some of these things. Like you can get up onto that whole train on customs. You could even at one point you could even get on top of 2-story and 3-story dorms. And I know that was exploitable. Thank you, Willers, for doing that, by the way. Which I believe they patched out. So,
well, they patched out the jump. I think you can still I think you can still get up there. But I think if you get down, you die. Right? Wasn't that the fall damage nerf?
That makes sense. Like, if you get up there, then you're going to die if you fall. Like, that makes sense. But
Yeah.
I just think the average player wouldn't know where to look in certain instances like that. So when you put yourself in a position that is unexpected, I think that like helps boost your odds of winning that gunfight that you need to have in whichever various map that you're in.
Yep, and I saw you make a shot from the new expansion side of customs all the way to gas station. I watched you make a couple shots there, and it's just like, and I think you said on stream, yeah, this guy has no idea what happened. Probably didn't even hear the bullet.
Oh, no. Oh, no. I love doing that kind of stuff and just finding different angles to shoot from. And that new area, I personally call it skeleton. It's just like that construction building that's not really finished. And I always end up going to that spot in particular because it's very central to the entire customs location. I can look at Stronghold, I can look at gas station, I can look at the train bridge that runs in front of gas station all the way back to that military checkpoint, and I can even look at dorms. So if I need to keep an eye on something, that's like a very central position on that map for me to figure out, okay, where are the PMCs moving, where are the players moving, and where can I go to get myself some action? Because at this point in Tarkov, this late in the wipe, I'm personally just kind of playing for PvP. And there is a point of discussion that I've wanted to talk with you guys is about item availability and scarcity in Tarkov. So I'll pose a question for you guys.
Let's do it.
What do you guys think about item availability and scarcity in Escape from Tarkov?
So let's do each of these. So when you say item availability, break down exactly what you mean by that. And I just want to make sure that we're talking clearly about each one of these separately. And so define it. What do you mean by item availability?
Sure. So I know one of the things that Battle States recently been doing has been changing the amount of like level 5 and up armor that you can straight up buy and or find. They've been adding in a lot of barters for people to use and to utilize. And then also the same thing with like high tier ammo, like high AP ammo, limiting that, making some of it only found in raid or barter. Like what's your guys' take on those sorts of changes?
Oh gosh. How many cans of worms were you trying to open?
All of
them. Item availability is something that I think I'm gonna say this because I've been playing some WoW recently with the latest expansion. Item availability to me is the wrong place to put the gates to gating content for me. I think there can be some of that, but it's usually tied to some sort of progress. It's better to gate the progress than it is to gate the items themselves, and then the items are the reward. And so right now it's tied to having the traders unlocked and having the rep to get those things or the tasks done that unlock some of those ammo and stuff like that. So I guess for me personally, I think that it doesn't matter how far you move some of these things. There will always be a segment of people that will find a way to rush and get to the meta, right? The most effective tactic available, right? That's meta. And a lot of times in Tarkov, I say it all the time, it's ammo. Ammo is the thing. Armor will absolutely protect you, and there's some things like that, but ammo, like you can be using the worst gun, but if you put the right ammo in it, it can one-shot somebody, right? An unkitted AK with BP ammo can kill somebody pretty easily. Likewise, if you have a unkitted hunter, no scope, but you're throwing, M61s through that or M62, like you can hurt someone. So for me personally, I think this is it's an interesting approach. I understand it. You see it all over the place. I guess I just don't think it's done well right now. I guess I don't have a good solution to it, other than, we've heard that the current task system happens way too quick, and if it goes persistent, it's going to be much longer to unlock these things. But I don't know how realistic that is. So I guess that's my introductory take to it, is it seems like, I don't even know if unnecessary is the word that I would use, but it's also hard to answer this from the end of, mid to end wipe situation that we're in right now, because it feels like everyone's shooting at you with the best ammo all the time. So yeah, that's my roundabout answer. Ronald, what do you think?
So I've got a two-part answer for this. The first part, with the item availability in general, it feels needlessly artificially gated to me. I think that there are some areas where getting and I'll start with the traders. There's some areas with the traders that just don't serve a purpose for the gating in my mind. So I mean, you can do tasks, you can do play the game and get XP, so you can play the game, but then at a certain point, especially in like the mid to late 20s, you are experienced enough to know what you're kind of doing, for the most part, and you don't have access from the traders anyways. I'm discounting for my first part of my answer here the ability to just make a bunch of money and buy whatever you want off the flea. I'm talking to like the FPS players that are more used to not dealing with an economy but just want to play the game, right? So it feels like it's artificially gated, and to me it doesn't feel natural. It doesn't flow well. And my critique of Tarkov would be that in general the game design doesn't feel like it flows very well. I would say on the flip side of that, I don't have as much time in game as either one of you, so I'm at level 32, but I have close to 80 million liquid, and I just never have to worry about money because I've played enough MMOs in my life that if there's an in-game economy, I can latch onto it, figure it out, and I'm good to go. But that doesn't mean that I'm necessarily always storming into resort to get the LEDX either. Like, I'll run around the outside and do a high percentage chance to come out with, say, 250 or 300,000 rubles 8 out of 10 times versus come out with a LEDX 2 out of 10 times. I don't know. You probably, Dotty, have a much better success rate than that. But, the average, like, normal player, right? And so for me, in that particular area, it doesn't feel like the gating of item availability makes a lot of sense, because I'm at the point now where I just buy everything in the flea market, but I feel like I should be able to get that stuff from the traders, right? And I'm almost to the point where, the traders are, most of them except for mechanic, or what are the 240 level traders?
Mechanic and Ragman.
And right, yeah. So I have 7 levels before I unlock them at level 4, right? And it feels just, the pacing of the game, I guess is where I'm getting, doesn't feel like it's quite right yet. And also, you talk about item availability versus item scarcity. You could be level 1 in Tarkov in your very first raid and get a lucky shot on somebody and pull out a 1,000,000 ruble kit, right? Is it likely? No. But could it happen if you, say, started a new account and you were level 60, right? Started a new account. If you're Pestily and starting a new account, he does it all the time, right? It's possible. So the game has the ability for everyone to have a chance in that way, but it just feels like the item availability, scaling, and scarcity doesn't match the game's, like, everybody has a chance at level 1. I don't know if I'm making sense, but this is kind of how this is only my second wipe, right? So getting through the process, it really felt like somewhere in the mid-20s, the game needs to be redesigned as far as the pacing goes.
There's a huge jump between level 32 and 40, and the gear that you get after you unlock those level 4 traders is quite vast. That's where you're starting to get into the meta handguards, the better barters for armor and things like that, so on and so forth. The reason why I posed this question, I guess, is because people talk, like, there's this ongoing battle in, I guess, the Tarkov community between, like, the streamer gamer that spends his life playing this game, and then the casual guy that has 5 hours a week to play Tarkov, right? What I would like the game to try and accomplish is removing as much of that meta gear as possible and making it more rare, so that way the average experience in a raid isn't just Exfil slick HK meta dude running around hosing people with 60 rounders, right? So when you see something like that in a raid, because it will happen, people will have that gear, those handguards, the suppressors, the ammo, the mags, the armor. But when you see something like that, it's worth a little bit more, or it means something a little bit more. Like that, the ultimate risk is there, because you're not just going to be able to go out and find another slick again if you lose it. That's kind of the thing that I've been wanting to see from Tarkov, is pulling back, like, some of that, the availability of, like, all this meta gear, the ammo, etc., and reducing it so that the hardcore gamer doesn't have quite as much access to it as the casual gamer.
Yeah, and on that exact point, one of the things that I was thinking about as you're describing that is what they've done with thermals. And I'm really, really curious, now that we're into this discussion, what do you think about what they've done with thermals?
I personally like it because I only see a thermal optic once out of every 20 raids, maybe, depending on the map that I'm playing. I can recall a time in Tarkov where it was hard to not see a thermal in a raid, and people were just too reliant on it, and maybe people wanted to run it because it was cool, or it was flashy at the time. But I personally like that, how they've made them found in raid only, or only acquired through, like, successful tasks or things like that, or you get a lucky one out of your scav junk box or something. But the way that they handled that thermal situation is in my opinion, a large step in the right direction, because not only are those items, like, very, very helpful to the success of your raids if you're an experienced player, but now that they're so limited, it's more impactful when you see them in a raid for once, because now they're just not that common, and so seeing one is a lot more important. That's kind of the point that I was trying to make, I suppose. So that's a great follow-up by talking about the thermal thing, because it's kind of out of sight, out of mind, because I barely see them anymore at this point in the game.
Do you think it would be more meaningful than if you're running around in a raid, right, and not everyone has the meta HK or meta whatever gun at the time? Is it time to kill that you'd like to see a little bit longer, or is it something specific? A piece of the way the raid unfolds. Like, what about the experience do you think could be better?
That's a good question. I honestly, I'll have to think more in depth about that, because all right, pass it. All right, Trigger's giving me the signal. All right, I'm taking it this time. Your turn, boss.
Well, like, I'm already, like, cringing over my original answer to your question, Dotty, because I like to ask the questions and then, then answer. So I'm going to spin that into my own sort of thought here, and I do want you to come back to yours, though, because here's the reason I brought up WoW before, and I totally forgot why I brought it up, and then I remembered it as you guys were talking. So one of the things that I really appreciate about very seasoned MMOs, and WoW's not the only one that does this, that's just the game that I'm currently playing and got into again, but they do progression gating extremely well. And before I go into how I think it could apply to Tarkov, here's the sad part to me about Tarkov. And the sad thing to me is that there are so many guns in this game. there are so many calibers of ammo in this game. There are so many different armors and bags and different healing items and all of these things. But the way that everything is currently unlocked for high-time players or just extremely experienced players, that we're literally taking one of... I mean, how many dozens of guns are there? How many dozens of how many calibers have a dozen different ammo types? There's just tons of that, and it doesn't get used ever, right? Even on scavs, it's like, okay, well, I have this, and if I get out of the raid, I'm just going to sell all of it. Like, if it's not, BP for 7.62, I'm selling it. If it's not M80 or better, I'm selling it. And so the reason I bring that up is, I hear what you're saying, Dotty, about not having that stuff be in there as often. And I see this as in my mind, there would be an easy way to steal from MMOs in their progression gating. And the way that I would see it done is, if they don't want to change a ton of stuff right now, what if they said, week 1 of the wipe, you can only get one trader to level 2. And maybe in one wipe it's, week 1, or maybe it's not even a week, maybe it's 5 days, whatever gating period they want to do. But what if it was, in 5 days you could get therapist to level 2, all of the rest remain 1. And then the next 5 days, okay, now peacekeeper can go to 2, and they stair step these, right? And maybe it's 2 traders or whatever, but they could create these steps where now all of this extra stuff unlocks, and now you have a bunch of different guns and a bunch of different parts, and ooh, I have this new red dot that I've never used before because, man, I just like the PK06, and I'm only going to use the PK06, and that's meta. It's the lightest and the best, the clearest. But if there was some gating to that over some period of time, not only does it keep the high playtime players closer in progression to the low time players, which keeps the PvP a little more equal, it would also allow all of this development that went into the guns and the ammo and the armor and the bags to really shine. So to me, that's what I always look at, is I just don't see... I think that allowing it to be unlockable from day one is what causes this issue, because the people that go out and farm it and play 40 hours a week, they can sell everything, and then people can farm money doing whatever they want, and then they just go buy it, and they completely skate having to progress. Which, I don't mind if someone masters the economy, that's great. But it just completely removes the need for progression, which is, I think, what Ronal was getting at, was that, well, what's the point? Why would I do that if I can do this and get access to everything? So that's kind of my take on it, and it's kind of been refreshed with my recent delve back into WoW.
Right. And there's definitely that crowd in the Tarkov community that they don't progress, they don't care about doing tasks and stuff, they simply just acquire everything they can off the flea market. I guess, and going back to your point, and that's kind of the thing that I was wanting to touch on with this question, was the thing that I wanted to see out of this, like, availability change and scarcity comment that I brought up, was that I wanted to I want to see something in Tarkov that closes the gap from the hardcore player to the casual player, so that way the guys that play 60 hours a week, 40, 50, 60 hours a week, don't always have, like, the best stuff available, the meta stuff available, and that the guys that are playing 5 to 6, 7, 8 hours a week still have an opportunity to find that stuff that they can use to bring down the players that are playing for 40, 50, 60 hours a week. Kind of narrowing that gap a little bit. That's been something that I've wanted to see in Tarkov. So, like, when I talk about seeing less slicks and seeing less HKs in games, like, I think that's something that makes the game a little bit more healthy in the long run, when you're not getting a consistent meta that's just being rushed every wipe. And that's just kind of how the game's been going the last few wipe cycles, personally, in my opinion.
Because one of the things that I find really interesting about the progression in Tarkov is that there are people that hate the flea market, and there's people that love the flea market, and there are people that don't have an opinion but don't really use it or don't understand how to use it. And Tarkov has so many systems The description on Battlescape's website, right, says that it's a FPS game with MMO-like systems, right? Which, what does that mean? It means you're going to kind of attract a lot of different people, kind of. And because of that, it's a very difficult balancing task. But I really think that one of the things that is going to need to be addressed before the game goes, 1.0, right? For sure, the game gets completed, air quotes, is the people who have the ability to die at their keyboard, right? And after 3 days, they're got their kappa and they're complaining there's nothing to do. And then the people that never make it past level 20 in the whole wipe because they just can only play for an hour or two a week, but love the game, right? Love the game. And the thing is, it's not like every game needs to be designed around casual play styles. And I'm not saying that. So if you're out there listening to this, that's not what I'm advocating for. But I think that there are other games that have been able to bring artificial balance to the die at your keyboard versus 1 hour a week through gating. And it's just, it doesn't hurt the people that can play 60 hours because they can still play 60 hours. It's just that your level of gear or level of what's available, and maybe even tasks, maybe you can only do 5 tasks a week or something, or some artificial time frame that, there's some average, right? There's an average number that people play, whether it's 5 hours a week or 10 hours a week. But, any more than that, and then you have to take a look at, okay, it's probably on one end of the bell curve, right? And so if they get to a point where they even consider that kind of data, I think the experience gets better for everybody. But I'd love to hear what you think about that.
You brought up the thing that caught my attention the most was your mentioning of the flea market. Do you think the flea market caters to that and allows for people to remain competitive in that gap? Because my opinion, I'm one of those guys that have been playing Tarkov since 0.2, after the game just came out of alpha. I remember the experience that Tarkov provided before the flea market, and I gotta tell you, it was a lot more rewarding and it was a lot more satisfying. Now, it just seems like a lot of people just want to go on the flea market. All right, I'm going to spend 1,500 rubles for this round, and so on and so forth, and then I'm going to put whatever kit I want together and just go play. And I see how that's appealing for a lot of people, but I personally think that the flea market should just be limited to quest and barter items specifically. I think you should take ammo completely out of it, in my personal opinion. But I'm wondering if the way that the flea market is set up now would change the answers that you have as far as like gating and progression goes.
It's an interesting question. I'll give you kind of a 75% answer because I'll be honest and say that I don't have enough time in the variety of how Tarkov has been to probably have as educated of an answer as you do. But I can tell you from my perspective on what the flea market has done for my experience in game to allow me to participate, and maybe that would be a good place to start. I think that as a medium time player, the flea market in Tarkov's current form allows you to be even remotely competitive, because right now people can die at their keyboards on the as soon as the wipe happens and they're level 60 4 days into the wipe, and they're running to all the high tier loot and they're taking it all, and you are still wearing a scav vest and rocking a hunter, and you have no chance. You have to get to level 10 and you have to play around that mechanic and that play style in order to get enough money to even build a gear set that's even close. And because of the trader system unlock progression, which is what I was talking about before, being kind of inconsistent at the very least, I don't have access to even good armor, good guns, good gear at the traders for a long time, right? It takes me a while to get to that point. So the flea market is this band-aid system that kind of levels the playing field, kind of, but not really, but kind of at times. And it is definitely good for someone like me. It can be abused by someone who plays more than I play, for sure, to just always have, whatever the best is. Because if you can afford it or not, I think though that if Tarkov wants to keep the current progression system and the current task system, at least from levels 1 to 30, you have to have a flea market. Otherwise, there's no way that a low time player will ever be even competitive in this game. You have no chance because people can race through the early game and be so kitted and so geared that if they're wearing level 5 or level 6 armor and running the best ammo, and you have a level 3, floral pattern armor on, and you're running like, an army helmet, right? You have no chance. And right now in Tarkov, that is how the game works. A week after the wipes out, the people that play the most are complaining there's nothing to do because they've played 60 hours, right? And it may take a low time player 8 to 10 weeks to play 60 hours. And I think that that's probably the biggest problem. So if you were to say, should the flea market be removed, in my opinion, I would play the game without the flea market, but I would not play the game in its current form without the flea market because it wouldn't be any fun. And I honestly, I would get slaughtered. Tarkov is fun for everybody on the wipe for about 4 hours the first day. That's when it's even. And then but after that, after about 4 to 6 hours, I noticed there was already people who were level like 15, 16 who had pushed a bunch of tasks and they were already, on that next level of gear. And then it's like, okay, well, we're just getting back to this now. I have to grind, to keep up with it. So that's just my opinion.
Oh, you and your cans of worms there, Mr. Hack. I agree with a lot of the 75% that Ronald gave. I think that the thing that I always look at when this conversation goes here is there's a number of things, and I don't think any of this is good or bad. I'm just trying to put out what I've seen and what the history of the game is, right? So the when you say the game was super rewarding back then and it just felt more rewarding to you, I could look at a year ago when I started this game and I had a good raid. It felt way more rewarding to me then, and the game is pretty similar comparatively from when I started and now compared to when you started and now. So there's that. The other thing I would look at is that version of the game was for a certain number of players, a small percentage compared to the players now. And the thing to ask is if you like the gameplay right now and you remove the flea market, you have to ask the question is, okay, do you want players to find the game like Ronald and myself? Now, I don't know. Ronald may have played the game without a flea market, but I'm an FPS player. I played Counter-Strike, I played tons of PUBG, and I have an MMO background. I was in and out of WoW over many years. And the thing that got me to Tarkov was the flea market. No questions. It was the fact that there was an economy because I love the economy in World of Warcraft. I love being able to manipulate it. I love being able to mess with it. I like price setting. I like battling other traders, people that are heavy auction house users in that game. And so the fact that that was even remotely available in Tarkov made me think that I want to check this game out. And so I probably would not have even touched this game without the flea market. So that's just a question. Do you want people like me in the game? I don't mean to attach you to that, Eric, but I wouldn't have touched this game without the flea market. I can tell you that. Someone that considers the flea market to be negative in that regard, you have to ask that question. Do you want players like me in the game? And if the answer is no, that's fine, but you won't have us joining the game or finding it. Right. Which, again, not necessarily good or bad. I'm just putting it out there. But I think the piece, Ronald, that you brought up that I most resonate with is in the current state of the game, without progression gating of some kind, I think there has to be a flea market because it is the only way that low time and high time players can be even remotely close. If there was some sort of progression, gating, you may not need the flea market because it would incentivize people to learn what's available. Or let's say we're week 4 in and the traders can be leveled up to level 2 each with one up to level 3. And that's just an example. I'm not saying this is the way they have to do it. But if somebody found the game and joined and it was like, oh, okay, well, I can grind and get all my traders to level 2 and 1 to level 3 and everybody else is stuck right now, fine. But it would force you, you'd have an incentive to learn what's on the traders and what they're offering. And, oh, next week they unlock this. That's awesome. It's going to do da-da-da-da-da. And it would open up this massive new content channel of, hey, week 7, here's what's coming. Here's what you can do. Here's going to be my favorite build that I want to try out. It's just something that they could tweak. And it's like, okay, well, man, Peacekeeper unlocking week 6 is OP because now people get this. Like, it would just change things dramatically. But I think, Ronald, you bringing up the fact that right now it is the equalizer. And Dotty, what you want as a veteran player for it to be closer together. And I think the flea market and the progression systems being ungated are super closely linked as it relates to scarcity.
Okay. One of the things that I know that Battlestate has changed to the loot tables recently was the introduction of armors and helmets and whatnot into those stashes, into the duffel bags and things like that. And I personally feel like that idea needs to be expanded on in Tarkov, not only just with armor and helmets and whatnot, but ammo types and things like that, because I feel like those things help the casual player as well, being able to find that stuff in raid and not have to be worried about being gated by a level lock or, having to spend an absurd amount of money for that same item on the flea market. And I think that the continuation of that idea would help continue to close that gap. I get your guys' point of not completely removing the flea market. And maybe I would just like to see a different instance of the flea market where they're taking away like the ammo sales or whatever the case may be. But I've always been a proponent of more stuff in raid. Like, put the emphasis of the game on the raid itself and not the flea market. But I see how the flea market helps elevate some of the casual players that are the players that don't have as much time in order to remain competitive against the no-life keyboard warriors like myself. So,
well, one of the interesting things that they did, and I mean, given this conversation, I'm really curious what you think. They introduced that level 5 armor for like 100 grand, 100,000 rubles. What do you think about that armor? And it's very repairable, which is very friendly to everybody, including low time players, So, what did you think about that as a step to try to bridge this gap?
I personally love it. I think it's on the low end enough for people to buy it, trust it, and run it, especially with their expensive M4s, or if they're running an MP7 or a Val or an FAL. It does repair really well, and I've noticed like I can have one zeroed out and it'll repair to 44.3 out of 45. But as far as that armor goes in raid, I do consider it kind of like a one and done. Like, you get hit in the chest with a Mosin round, that armor is going to be pretty susceptible if you go into your next gun battle. But for its price point, I think it's perfect. And for the class armor that it is. So I think that's a win in helping like bridge that gap that we're continuing to have this conversation about. And I would like to see more things like that being introduced into the game that makes those with less time more viable, and even putting that armor at a lower level lock so that way people can get access to it a little bit more earlier without having to spend as much time, without getting stuck between level 32 and 40 without having access to it. Because that's kind of the big thing, is your huge jump, and I know you touched on this point earlier, the huge jump is between that level 3 and level 4 trader availability, especially with Ragman, because that's where the good armor's at. That's where the good barters are at. And to add to that point, I think some of those barters should come down in level lock as well, so that people have more access to that aren't getting to spend as much time on the game.
Well, it's interesting because the rewarding, your point about the game feeling rewarding has made me think about this in a slightly different way, especially because I can relate to the idea of wanting to play something that is a little bit harder, but with more of a specific purpose, I guess. And what I think Tarkov is having trouble with in its current iteration, they may change this, is that it really feels like you're just grinding to get to a certain point where you just have more money than you need to worry about. And then it just feels like it's just not balanced. And I keep coming back to this idea that the pacing of the game doesn't feel great to me. And I think that is the root of the problem, because if the pacing of the game was different from a number of perspectives, you wouldn't need the flea market. And there's so many items in Tarkov. They've done such a good job at making the gun so configurable, and that so much of it's not used. And it's just, and I imagine without the flea market before, it probably was a lot of more of it was used, because I've seen you go to traders and build guns and just fly through the menus. And I'm like, what is he doing?
Yeah.
You know, and that has to come from necessity, right? Before all of this existed, that was the way you played the game. And to me, that seems like that would be a lot of fun, because you do have the survivalist aspect of what Tarkov is supposed to be. Plus, you have to make a choice, especially on the ammo side. And you have to make a choice, right? If you're going to take really good ammo in, you either have to craft it or find it. In that scenario, you can't just go buy it. Now that definitely hurts a low time player in the current form of the game. If the game was different, it may not attract the same amount of people, or it may attract a different person, but I can see how it would be more rewarding if it was different in that way. So I mean, it's interesting to me because I don't know if I would personally like it. I'm still trying to figure that out, but I can see how it could be more rewarding.
Right. And you talked about that ammo choice, right? Being the biggest risk that you take when you go into Tarkov or go into a raid. If you're bringing in that ammo that is so expensive and so effective that it's highly coveted, right? So removing its availability and making it something that's more scarce, maybe where it's only found in raid, or you can only craft it with like a certain recipe, helps, I think, lower that gap between the person with 5 hours and the person with 50 hours. Obviously, with ammo and whatnot and armor, that's kind of like mid-tier that most people have access to. That seems like that's a healthy area for the game to exist. But once you start getting into an area where everyone's just holding on to slicks and M995 or whatnot, then that's where like those players just stomp all over the casual. So if you have those extremely effective items, armor, ammo, whatnot, only found in raid, and there's no other way to attain it, it gives it so much more value, but also doesn't specifically promote, that the 60-hour player is always going to find it, right? And the person with less time still has an ample opportunity to find those types of things within the game. I think that's kind of been the direction I've wanted to see this go in terms of the way that the game is in its current state.
Yeah, I struggle with a point that each of you made regarding that, because I guess, again, we're talking about the ways the game could go, and we're talking like 4 alternate universes now, right? But I guess when we talk about like no flea market and trader viability, let's start there, and learning how to buy those parts off of traders, that flies directly in the face of making the game raid focused, right? Especially from a new or a low time player perspective, right? You can fly through the menus and build a gun, but a new person coming in that doesn't have the current, weapon building function or doesn't have the flea market, like, yeah, they're going to have to learn it and they're going to have to want to learn it, but it takes a game. You spend that much time outside of the raid, and if you only have an hour or two to play, you're not going to play this game. And that's, again, alternate universe. Maybe that's the way. When we're talking about ammo and stuff only found in raid, I don't see that as bringing the low playtime and high playtime closer, right? And I think right now there's a pretty good balance, right? In the middle to the end of the wipe. I think the interesting part right now is that the lower time players are progressing into the mid game or well into the end game or have as much money as they want. And now you have people that are high playtime and push to this meta stuff. And now you're dealing with maybe low time players that are very skilled at FPS. And so this is when these feelings rise up as like, oh crap, now it is actually even. Everybody has access to this really good stuff and I'm dying more. Right? And I experienced that to some extent. But I don't know that saying just making it scarcer it brings that any closer. I think it brings it farther away unless you have truly dynamic loot at that point. Because if you're just saying, well, if you can only find that ammo find in raid, well, then the high time player is going to run reserve over and over and over and over and over and just going to have stacks of the ammo again. And the low time player who's still stuck at level 7 and the high time player has pushed levels again, like, it's just worse then. Because now you've removed the access for the low time player and the high time player has just farmed it.
Yeah, I think my point is that in Tarkov in its current form, at least my opinion, is that we couldn't make that change. They would have to do some kind of pacing change and gating change with levels. I'm not sure if Tarkov really even needs levels. That's an interesting thing to think about. I'm not sure what the leveling system really does. The task system could be changed to give different rewards, and maybe it could be focused more around the trader unlocks. Because experience means nothing. Level really means nothing other than just an artificial gating system for the hideout, and for the traders. I actually I agree. I agree with Trigger in the sense that the game in its current form, you couldn't take the flea market out. But what I was saying before is that if they made a change, I could see the flea market not being necessary. And that would also require changing the barter items needed for tasks or whatever and dynamic loot, so that dynamic loot really is a game changer. Because right now, everyone heads to the 3 rooms in Shoreline Resort to get the LEDX. Well, what if the dynamic loot meant the LEDX had spawned in a stash in the woods? You know what I mean? And I think that dynamic loot would change the paths of the people who have the game memorized in its current form, which would make it more interesting for them, right? And the people who don't have it memorized wouldn't know any different. They would be excited because now they're finding things in other places. I think that one of the things they talked about, I think this was back in April or May, they had heat maps of where players go on the big outdoor maps like Shoreline and Woods and Customs. And they had ways of looking and seeing how most of the map, specifically on Shoreline, was never getting used. And so their thought process with Sanitar was to have him spawn in a couple different places on purpose, and there's a lot of different things, right, that go into that. But my point being in saying that is, if we want to change the experience in Tarkov and change the loot scarcity and make the game feel more rewarding, some of the systems just have to be changed, because it rewards time played hands down right now. And it's just, I don't think it can be like that and then get rid of the equalizers for time played. I've never played a game that successfully bridged that gap without gating content, I guess is my point.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, the thought that I have regarding like truly dynamic loot, if it was things can spawn anywhere, they have a low percentage chance to spawn anywhere, but maybe at the resort, Athletics has a 6% higher spawn rate, right? So in any place in the resort, right? So you'd still have hotter areas, but the guy that's running stashes could have a chance to find one. I think the interesting question in my mind, because I could argue either side of this all day long, but I think about how big some of these maps are. And if we enter dynamic loot into it, it makes me wonder if that would really hurt the PvP natured player. Because, you might have people that just, completely avoid everything because they know, like, to your point, Dotty, you said it earlier, like, you can avoid PvP areas and take out hundreds of thousands. I mean, I've perfected this on Interchange. Ronal, I know you've perfected it on Shorelines. We have high consistency scav runs. And PMCs may end up doing that in a dynamic situation because, like, oh, well, if I go hit all the Jaeger stashes and avoid everybody, I got a, 5% chance of a LEDX, which means every 20 raids I'll find one, and I can live 90% of the time. And if you have 4 or 5 guys doing that in a raid, I wonder if that hurts the PvP on the map. And there's a delicate balance right now, and we've gone away from saying Rat and Chad, but it still comes up. But you have these bunch of different play styles, right, all over the place. And right now, they seem to coexist pretty well, right? You don't really feel like one is overpowered. And if someone wants to run labs all day, that's fine. They don't affect me on Interchange, right? And the person that wants to farm Killa and then Exfil and farm Killa again doesn't really affect my playstyle on Interchange. So it's interesting how right now everyone kind of coexists pretty well, and I think some of the hesitation on Battlestate's part is I bet they see that. We don't know the player numbers, we don't know how many people have retained, but raids have been launching like crazy still, right? There's no map that's not launching. So I gotta imagine it's a little bit more challenging than just like, oh, let's try this. Because if you go one way too hard, you could completely alienate a massive chunk of the player base and see those numbers drop dramatically.
Yeah, and to your point, I have noticed, at least as far as my raids go, I've noticed a total number of PMCs that I encounter at this point in time slightly decreasing. Whether that's the player base not being as prominent as it has in times past, or the way that players kind of navigate the map and how they traverse through different areas has changed. But I will say, like, on a given raid, with the exception of the big red side on customs, because if you spawn over there and you're looking for PvP, you can end up fighting 6 or 7 players like within the first 5 minutes of raid. But when I think about my experiences on Shoreline and my experiences on Interchange and Reserve, the amount of PMCs that I run into on a raid to raid basis has sort of like dropped a little bit. So I am curious to see if this dynamic loot system that gets added into the game would pull that down even further by telling players, okay, I can still find very high successful or have high successful loot runs by avoiding all these PvP areas. So I'm very interested to see how that would affect the game.
Yep. I wonder as well, because people spawn in and run directly towards certain areas. And one of the other things that I've been really interested to talk to you about is actually when people spawn in and run to a certain area, on most maps, right? Customs, they've got a place. Shoreline, you got a place. But Trigger and I have been talking about woods the last couple of episodes, and honestly, how we're both awful at it. And the woods expansion that's coming out, I'm really curious. Do you know, can you share, or what is your opinion on, is woods going to be relevant or interesting from a loot perspective more than it is now? Is the pathing through the map going to be different? Kind of switching topics a little bit, but I really wanted to get this into this show because we have been talking about woods for the last couple episodes, and really would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I know that that's one of the big things that's coming up next, and I'm surprised we didn't get to touch on this a little bit earlier. But I am extremely excited for the Woods expansion. The way that I feel that Woods is right now, it's very linear, and it all just depends on which side you spawn on. Whichever side you spawn on, you're going one way around the curve. If you're on the opposite, you're going the other way around the curve. And all that loot is kind of dead center in the map. in that lumberyard. If Sturman's there, is he going to have a red rebel? What's his stash going to have? And I just can't wait as a sniper myself in Tarkov. I can't wait to see it get expanded and have more points of interest and have multiple paths for PMCs to kind of traverse through that map. Because right now, it really only feels like there's one or two ways to go. And it just, like I said, it just depends on what side you spawn on.
Yeah, that's kind of been our feeling as well, as I've kind of gone into it and tried to learn it, right? My goal going in was, learning the current pathing so that when it gets expanded, I have that kind of comfort on the map. And you kind of said it, right? The additional path or having something else to do or having an alternate option, rather than just coast or wall. Right? There's just nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
And the space between the coast and the wall at the lumber camp is tiny. I mean, as a sniper in a couple spots, you can cover almost the entire thing. And I find that interesting. So is wood something that later in the wipe you tend to just avoid? Or what do you want to see? Like in the woods expansion, what do you want to see? Maybe that's a better question.
If I'm being perfectly honest, I just go to woods to hit long range shots. Like if I want to hit 200 plus, 300 plus meter shots, like that's just kind of a map where I know where I have sight lines to see people at longer distances. There's a chance for that. There's a boss fight. So with the expansion coming, I just want to see more points of interest. I want to see more paths, and I would love to see different sight lines that people can utilize to have longer range combat. And that's kind of the thing that sets Woods apart from most other maps is it's the sniper map. It's the map where you want to bring out your long rifle to shoot long distances. So playing into that map as it is, adding more points of interest. I believe from the things that I have heard and the speculation was that they were going to expand the map like kind of around the lake. I don't know if that's true or not, but it would just be such a unique experience to have multiple places with 400, 500 plus meter sight lines with multiple points of interest. The boss having multiple locations to spawn, like we talked about with Sanitar and Shoreline. Because as that map is right now, you do your quests there and then you go play it if you want to shoot like long distances. But outside of that, it's not a map where you're going to make a lot of money. It's not a map that has like a lot of replayability to it. So that has been the map that has desperately needed an overhaul. So I am looking forward to that and seeing what they end up deciding to do with that map.
Yeah, and we've got the Woods expansion on the horizon. We've got Streets of Tarkov somewhere in the future. We've got new guns teased. Without going in depth on all of those because we're we're into this now. But what are you most looking forward? And if it's Woods, that's fine. But what are you most looking forward to and why of the stuff that we've heard from Battlestate over the last couple of months that has yet to hit the game?
Well, I'm really excited for Woods to get that expansion. It's been the map that's needed it the most. I'm very interested for a couple of new rifles that they're coming out with. The Chris Vector being the one SMG I cannot wait to get my hands on. They just teased a 300 Blackout caliber, which I've had the fortunate opportunity to shoot IRL, and it is a phenomenal caliber to shoot. It has very low recoil. It is quiet. It's quieter than a mouse on Christmas Eve, and obviously the big one that everyone's waiting for is Streets of Tarkov. So like, I'm just excited for the mayhem that will ensue when that map comes out.
It's awesome. It's funny, man. It feels like it's been announced for so long that it's like it almost doesn't exist right now. And I think it's going to drop and just explode everybody's mind.
And I don't know why they did that press release over the summer for the map. Like, if the map wasn't ready, why would you go through all this trouble publishing this hype? Like, you would think, and I certainly thought this, was that map was pretty much ready to go and we were going to wait 1 or 2 more months and then Streets of Tarkov was going to be here. But here we are, 6 months later, still no word. So I'm just like, what was the decision? Why was that the decision that was made? So all in all, very excited for that map, and I hope we get it Q1, Q2 of next year, because this community definitely needs it. We've been waiting for a very long time.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, man, I'll say my thanks. I really appreciate you coming on. I mean, it's a blast to talk through this stuff. I mean, this is stuff that, we talk back and forth all the time, but it's awesome to have a fresh take and to challenge some of the things that I think about. I know Ronal as well. But I just want to say thank you for coming on. And what we do at this point in the show is I want to just give you the floor. And what I'd ask of you is to let everybody know where they can find you, your social media, your Twitch. And what I want you to tell everybody is what they can expect. It's been a long time since we've had you on the show. I love coming into your Twitch channel and seeing people that listen to the show still and having conversations there. But for someone that hasn't been there, let people know what they can expect and how to find you, man.
Cool. Well, first thing I want to say is, thank you both, Trigger and Ronal, for inviting me back on the show. I've been dying to come and sit down and talk with you guys again. Always look forward to seeing you guys. For those that are listening out there, please share this with a friend. These guys put on a great show. They do a lot of hard work. I would definitely appreciate it if you showed a buddy or two, especially if they want to get introduced to Escape from Tarkov. These guys know their stuff. As far as me, you guys can find me on Twitch at twitch.tv/Dottyhack. I'm on Twitter at twitter.com/DottyhackTV. I pretty much go live almost every day around 2 p.m. Pacific, with the exception of maybe some Saturdays and Sundays I like to take off just to kind of relax. And if you guys want to find like a really cool environment to listen to some awesome music, some awesome gameplay and Escape from Tarkov, I would love to have you guys swing by and have a chat with you.
Absolutely. Well, before we do get out of here, I want to take just a moment to say thank you very much for being on the show. We absolutely love having you here. And I enjoy your stream a lot. So I'm going to personally also plug your stream and say that it's one of my personal favorites. I definitely lurk a lot, while I'm working, and really enjoy your community. It's a positive community of just awesome people, and it's just great. And so I think it's one of the best places on Twitch to go hang out. So thank you once again for spending some time with us, and everybody who's listening to this, go check out Dotty's stream. It's great.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
But besides that, as always, we're starting to see the green bar flash, which means that we are moments away from disappearing. But before we do, if you're brand new to the show, I want to say thank you for listening to the podcast. Really appreciate it. If you have not joined the Exfil Discord yet, we want to encourage you to join the community. We're almost 1,500 strong, and it's a great community for talking Tarkov or PUBG, a couple other games. There's always people looking for groups or playing and just hanging out. So come join us, be nerds. It's a lot of good time. Also, if you have trouble with your computer, like we talked about in hideout keeping, we definitely have a help desk section there of folks willing to help you optimize and get Tarkov running great. You can find us on iTunes and Spotify, Stitcher, Pandora very soon, Google Talk, Deezer. Basically, there are so many places that you can find an audio podcast. Just start one, and then you'll find out how many places you have to post it. And of course, you can watch this version of the show, the talk show version, where you can see Dotty live and in person with Trigger and I on youtube.com/XPMediaNow. Encourage everyone to leave a comment there or leave a review on your platform of choice. It really helps spread the show and tell the algorithm that, hey, let's get some more people listening to it. And besides that, as always, good luck in your raids, and we hope that you have a good week, and we'll see you next time.
I totally forgot to mention Dotty's hair.
Leave it for the outro.
It's gone. What'd you do to it?
Oh man, I just got tired of dealing with it. I got tired of my hair being all over the place. I wanted it to be, I just wanted to keep it clean, keep it simple, have some sort of style to it, but I didn't want to have too much anymore. It was just getting to be too much maintenance,
I totally forgot. It was like the last thing we said before going live on this. Anyway, guys, hey, hope you have good raids this week. Make sure to check out Dotty. We'll see you guys all very soon.